Okay, firstly, let me congratulate you on the longevity of Sweet Honey in the Rock. You're approaching 30 years now, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much. We are surprised and excited.
What is the key ingredient to keeping it together for so long, do you think?
Hard work, very hard work, and having work that is dynamic and changing, and work that really pulls from you the core of who you are in a lot of different ways.
Just thinking back to the beginning, how did you go about putting the group together initially? Did you have specific people in mind when you formed the group?
What I call the first rehearsal, I was vocal director of a theater, and I actually called together the strongest singers in my vocal workshop, 8 to 10 people. This is early part of 73, and sort of worked back and forth through several months. I was in a theater, and these were theater people, and their priorities were theater. So there was a lot of moving around of personnel at that first time, and I got to the point where I thought, this isn't really going to work, and I just sort of dropped it. And I think about late August of that year, one of the women who had been very interested said, that's really a good idea, you ought to do it. And I called another rehearsal, and only 3 people showed up. I was disappointed, but since I called the rehearsal, I just started singing, and I called songs for 5 or 6 selections, and the fit was unbelievable. And instead of what had been in my mind, an ensemble of 8 to 10 people, there were 4 women. And so it wasn't as if Sweet Honey worked out the way I thought it might. It was when it worked, I had enough sense to say, okay, this is it.
If we were to ask you back in 1973 what was your aim, or what was the specific goal that you wanted to achieve with the group, what would you have said?
I had no idea. The idea for the group didn't come from me. I was very satisfied with the work I was doing. I was working on my doctorate at Howard University at the time. I had 2 children. I was a single parent. And I was responding to what people were saying about what they experienced in my workshops. And they said, this music doesn't exist anywhere, and this style of harmony and singing and attitude isn't present. It ought to go on the concert stage. And so Sweet Honey exists in terms of vision because of people in my workshop. Sweet Honey exists in reality because I have some organizing and administrative skills, and I will surrender to a work without knowing where it will go. And so if you had asked me, our first performance was November 73, and if you had asked me where was the group going, I would have told you I didn't know. I sort of knew when the next rehearsal was. Mm-hmm. And that first performance, I didn't know when the next performance would be. So Sweet Honey began at a 0 level with a lot of not knowing. And even without attitude of let's have a band, you know, there'll be some people sometimes when they're talking about their history, they have within themselves that they really want to be in a band. and they'll go and start a band. That was not what Sweet Honey was about. And it was about people wanting to have more of what they were getting in my workshop, and it turns out that Sweet Honey has satisfied that to some extent. I was surprised at the 7th anniversary that it was 7 years. That was the first time I allowed myself to think that maybe there was something happening.
I guess looking back on those early days, as you say, you would have been quite a unique outfit at the time. Did you have any difficulty in those early days finding an initial audience?
We weren't looking in the way that people look for work. Everybody was doing something. They were either in theater, or I had a job at the Smithsonian. I was in school. And so we actually were much more like a community-based group who got together to rehearse. In those early years, we were invited to sing at conferences, in schools, at funerals, for weddings, then festivals. I think one of our first expansions was the Smithsonian Festival, and the woman who put on the Toronto Festival came to the Smithsonian Festival. She invited us to the Toronto Festival, and we got an invitation out of that to the Chicago Folk Festival and the Vancouver Festival. And then from the Chicago Festival got our first offer for a recording on Flying Fish. So things really moved on what people would really call grassroots organizing level. And I know that most of the time when you say grassroots organizing, you think of organizing for social change rather than, say, a small vocal a cappella ensemble. But Sweet Honey really did start from zero without a huge appetite and need to break someplace, but really just doing what we loved and being immensely grateful at the reception. And the way we received, I think, helped to pull us along and helped us to understand that we had larger audiences. And it was a very, very sort of gradual kind of thing. The other place that our early offers came from were, I was always working as a solo performer. So I started, anybody who asked me to perform as a soloist, I said, I have a group. Can you do a concert with a group? And of course they would say how much, and I would give them a price, and then that would be Sweet Honey, a Sweet Honey job. And our first California tour came because Holly Near, a singer within the Women's Network at that point, heard a solo recording of mine. And she sent Amy Horowitz, who worked with her, to my house. And Amy said, Holly would like to work with you or to bring you out to California. And I said, well, I have a group, and it's Sweet Honey and the Rock. Now, at that point, I also had a doctorate, and I had been invited to be professor in residence for a month at UC Santa Cruz. I said, well, I'm going to UC Santa Cruz. It would really be great if the group could come out after that and do the tour. And she went and called Holly, and they made it so. So I'm describing a very, very natural kind of expansion for the group. And I think that is connected to why we're still here.
Well, it's back in the 60s also you were involved with the Freedom Singers. How vivid are your memories of that time now?
What did you say?
Back in
Do I have memories?
Yeah, how vivid are your memories of that time?
I don't It's interesting. I don't think of them as memories. It's like, do you know anything about a tattoo?
Yeah.
When something has been burned into your being,
yeah,
it's not like memories. It's like it's a part of who you are, and you can sort of trace it anytime you put your hands on it, which for me is a little different than memories.
Sure.
I don't have to recall it. It's always there.
It's always there. It's part of you. Yeah. There's been quite a few member changes through Sweet Honey through the years. Is there a uniform quality that you think they all possess, all the people that have been involved?
No. Very early, people started to leave. I remember we had our first big concert at the Walnut Theater in Philadelphia. And the concert had been booked 6 months earlier. When we got the offer, I called the group together. And I said, this is the first time we're looking at a concert where it's 6 months away. I said, I don't want to sign this concert unless everybody agrees to do it. And everybody agreed. I signed the contract. It was for September. In August, there was only one person who had agreed, who was available. And she was actually available because she had a baby. And she couldn't be in the show or whatever it was that had pulled everybody else away. So in August, I had to reformulate a group to do that concert. I was actually in shock, and I really realized that I didn't have a group who was committed to being there first. You know, there were other things in their lives. And I think there have been 22 women in Sweet Honey. And one of the things in the first 10 years I learned was that people, what was consistent about Sweet Honey is that people would come and then they would leave. And what was also consistent was that we would find someone else to come into the group. We also very quickly worked out that people couldn't be replaced. You had to, when you were looking for somebody to come into the group, not try to find somebody who would take the place of the person who left, but you had to find somebody with real singing power, some uniqueness in terms of their voice range or the styles they would bring to the group, and the willingness to be in a group that was socially and politically active in terms of taking stands. And when you put those things together, if you got a strong person who was interested in trying it out, then that person would be invited to join the group. And it was just one of the hardest lessons I had to learn as the person who took on the responsibility of building the group was to be all right when people left, and understanding that somebody would come. And what we would then have to do, those of us who were in the group would have to shift so that we could help the person who had come in to find a place to make their contribution. And it kept all of us learning. We had to learn what that person had to teach, and that person, of course, had to learn a huge amount of music and styles of singing that they had never participated in before.
In terms of choosing material to record and perform over the years, have you been conscious of having a nice balance between, you know, songs of social and political comment and other material as well?
We actually have a recording format that we call a regular Sweet Honey. And we will look at that and we will say, are there issues in this collection of songs? Have we addressed some issues that we're concerned with? Are there any songs on this recording that existed before we were born? Are we passing old songs forward to a new generation. Is there anything in here about children? Is there anything in here about dying? Is there anything in here about being in love or, God forbid, being out of love? And so when we looked at a group of songs we thought were about ready for us to consider for recording, we then asked those questions about the program, and that would result in a Sweet Honey Regular, which is a program of songs that cover several music genres and cover time periods and cover stages of life as well as contemporary issues. Then we have Sweet Honey for younger audiences. And that's our attempt to partner with parents who are trying to raise young children. We don't expect 6 and 7 and 8-year-old kids to say, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy, I want the Sweet Honey children's record." But we think that there are parents who really would love for their children to get an experience on their level of what we offer in our regular concerts. And then we've done 2 recordings of sacred music. So we have sort of formats we deal with, and the Sweet Honey Regular is what you're thinking about. We are releasing Alive in Australia in connection with the tour we will be doing next month. And when Belinda Gross, who is the Australian co-producer, and I worked with the program, we did the same kinds of questioning to try to be sure that the program covered the territory that we like to cover.
For you, is there a secret ingredient or a key to successful a cappella singing? Is there a golden rule?
I've not thought about it. I don't know if I separate a cappella singing in that way from any
other singing,
other kind of creative expression. I think there has to be a certain kind of discipline, and the artists have to take themselves seriously and take care of their instrument, and also be willing to woodshed, to rehearse, to learn new things, and to check back over old things. And you, in the case of singing, you need to have some vocal prowess. There are many different a cappella traditions. Ours is African American. That comes with a certain kind of attitude and energy where you're not really doing what would be, say, beautiful barbershop style singing. You're not doing sweet doo-wop. You're not doing pop. The music has to come from whatever your life force is. And so when people taste your singing, they should feel that they really have met a wall of sound that is charged with the life and commitment of the artist who are performing.
Now, I believe in more recent times, because of your work outside of Sweet Honey, you've involved yourself less in the day-to-day running of Sweet Honey. Has that enabled you to enjoy the performance side of things a little more?
Now, where have you been? Where did you get that information?
Off a bio that I've got here.
I programmed every Sweet Honey concert for the first 12 years. And now we share programming. And then when we reached I think, the 24th year, I pulled way back, and we now have an office, an administrative director who is not a performer in the group to help us with administration and logistics. And so that there are more people participating in running the business of Sweet Honey. For the first 2 decades, I ran all of it, and as the group developed, it got to be much more than I could manage and still enjoy Sweet Honey. And I think that the result of making the shift has increased how long I've been able to be with the group. I'm pretty sure if we had not made the change, I would not be looking at the 30th year.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was really more than one person could manage.
Your audience base has changed much over the years. Are you finding you're drawing your audiences from some different sources now than in the past?
Most of the time, I think we are very much like any other person group that comes to the concert. You pray that somebody will be in the hall when you get there. And you are grateful that people decide they will be there. I think we don't do more colleges than we used to do, but we do the performance series. I don't know if you understand what I mean by that. In our universities and colleges, we initially were brought to the colleges by the Women's Studies Department and the Black Studies Department, which had no budgets. Now the performance series for the college will actually bring us. There are also performing arts centers that will also bring Sweet Honey in the Rock. So there's been some expansion in our name recognition and in an acknowledgement that there is a constituency on the local level that would enjoy a Sweet Honey in the Rock concert. To that extent, we have expanded and deepened our ability to actually perform, expand audiences, and also improved our ability to earn a living doing what we do.
Now, just before we wind up, I know I've got to let you go to an appointment. Can you just run through the current lineup of Sweet Honey that we'll see on your Australian visit?
Okay, I'm Bernice Johnson Reagon, and I founded the group in 1973. Also with us will be Carol Maillard. Carol Maillard is an original member of Sweet Honey, joining and staying with the group a few years and then leaving and coming back in 1990. She has been to Australia several times with us. Also in 1979, Isa Maria Barnwell came into the group, and she's known in Australia for some of her vocal workshops. In 1981, Aisha Khalil came into the group, and she's been with us many times in Australia. And Nitanju Bolade Kassel, 1985, will also be with us, and she's also traveled to Australia. By these dates, I'm giving the dates so that people can have a sense that even though 22 women have been in Sweet Honey in the Rock these past 3 decades almost, in fact, we've had a very stable personnel for over 15 years.
Yeah.
That's a blessing.
For sure. Any special plans for the 30th anniversary coming up?
We're working on a CD. We're also working, hopefully, on a film project so that the 30th year will be filmed. We will be doing a group of concerts that are special collaborations between Sweet Honey and the Rock and my daughter, Toshi Reagon, who's a musician in her own right. She was 9 years old when I started Sweet Honey, and now she is fronting her own band. She's sort of a rock band, musicians, so it'll be a very interesting collaboration to do these special commission concerts in our 30th year. And in that program, we actually will have sort of a dual window. One, we look back on the 30 years, and two, she looks back on the 30 years. And so it should be an interesting production that we're doing.
Sounds like a busy and exciting year.
Yes.
Bernice, thank you so much for your time. I know I've got to let you go. We're really looking forward to seeing Sweet Honey down here in Australia again. You know you're always very welcome down here.
Well, thank you very much. I know you called much earlier before you knew we were even coming, so I'm very grateful that you reached out to us. Australia is such a special place for this group in ways we don't really always know or can always articulate. So it's always good that we're able to come again. We're really looking forward. And
I can assure you we certainly are too. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you in August.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.